This is Penny Keener, Stampin' Up! Independent Demonstrator and the original Keener inker. Today we're going to be making a shimmer white flower embossed card using the Flourish Phrases set from our annual book. It is a 2-case set, so it offers some flower images as well as wording. The colors we're using today is Basic Gray, Poppy Parade, and Versamark ink, as well as cardstock is Basic Gray and Whisper White, which are very neutral colors. First thing I'm going to do is emboss my flower, and to do that I'm going to take my embossing buddy and kind of pounce it over my piece of Whisper White cardstock. Next I'm going to take my Versamark ink, which is very sticky, and it's also clear, so it's a little bit hard to see when you're stamping it onto white cardstock. But I'm just going to take my flower and I'm going to stamp it multiple times. I'm wanting it to have the appearance of designer series paper without having to use that. And I was making quite a few of these cards, so in doing so, I actually did bigger than the piece I needed for this card. And then I'm going to cut it down and actually get 2 cards out of this. This is our Shimmer White Stampin' Embossing powder, and it already has the glitter right in there. So what I'm going to do is kind of dump that over my project and move it around to where it's covering the flower shapes. You can see I need a little more over down in this area, and there as well. All right, once I have that coated pretty good, I'm going to tap off the excess and I can pour that back into my container. Sometimes when you have embossing, you might see flicks that are not where they're supposed to be. The embossing buddy really helps with that, but just in case there is any spots, you can rub that off before you emboss. So I'm going to set this to the side. And then I'm going to use my heat tool, and I always use it on the high setting, but I do like the fact it has 2 settings depending on what you're doing with it. So I'm going to kind of hold it about 1 inch away from my project until you can start seeing it change. Embossing is one of those really cool things that are fun to watch all the time. Once it changes, I'm going to start moving it around to heat set the entire piece of my project. So what did the flower say after he told a joke? I was just pulling your leg, of course. Alright, so I am about half done here, and the heat tool is very hot, so you don't want to put your fingers under it. I also find if you're embossing a small piece of cardstock, it's always better to have your heat tool straight up above it versus at an angle, because sometimes it'll just blow away from you. You know when your entire thing is embossed when you can kind of lift it up to the light and see it all kind of glossy shimmer. If there's any kind of a matte look to it, still you'll need to heat set that area. Alright, I am done with that, so I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to use our paper trimmer to cut this down. The size I want for this particular card is 2 by 5.5. So this particular started at 4 by 5.5. All right, so now looks like a silver flower on white cardstock, and I want to add some color to that. So I'm going to use our Poppy Parade stamp pad and a sponge. And this sponge has been cut multiple times to make more of a wedge than a full sponge. And then what I'm going to do is just take this and rub around on the cardstock. Now this particular flower actually has space in between the petals, so if you're not getting that popping up very good, just kind of push that embossing sponge or the sponge down into the embossed image and they'll pop out a little more. All right, one of the things about this particular project is you don't want to get ink on yourself. The color goes and dries on the cardstock, but it doesn't dry on the embossed area. So I take a piece of paper towel and I just kind of rub over that, and what that does is it picks up the ink that's not going to dry. All right, so now my embossed flower is ready. I am going to stamp a sentiment for this using my Going Gray, and the one I'm using, it says Just a Note. I'm going to punch this out using the Timeless Label Punch. Now, because this is a very neutral card and we're using almost white on white, I am going to take my sponge and just kind of sponge around the edges just a little bit so it'll pop against my white background. Now, if you notice, there's a lot of glitter on that stamp pad. The easiest way to remove that is actually just take a piece of shipping tape and just pick that glitter right up, and you're good to go. All right, get those ink colors out of the way. So now I'm going to layer my cardstock together. I have a piece of basic gray. It's 5.5 by 2 5/8. So I'm going to put snail on the back of my cardstock and then layer it onto here. And because I'm just adding border at the top and the bottom, if you didn't want to use an entire big piece of cardstock, you could actually use just 2 strips and add it to the top and the bottom. All right, so I have that on there. So now I'm going to add that to my cardstock. And I'm just using snail for that. Here's my card base. It's Whisper White. I already have a score line in there, so I'm going to take that. I'm going to fold it in half, get in a nice crease with my bone folder, and layer this on. I'm doing it just a little higher than center so I can put my sentiment at the bottom. And add some dimensionals for that. All right, so my wording on this particular card, I'm just going to kind of offset it and put it towards the right side. And here's my finished card. And because this was so easy, I actually did most of my embossing on a half a sheet, so I was able to cut down and get 4 cards out of it. I did it in other colors as well. So you can see this is such, reminds me of summer coming. So I have my Poppy Parade, I have Bermuda Bay, Terracotta, and Mint Macaron. But this is our Shimmer White Flower Embossed card, fun to send to anyone. Please check out my website and subscribe to my channel.